was based on the previous intensity of the storm. And so this may be a little bit too conservative in some areas. It is, for example, showing 60 to 75 mile per hour in Grand Isle. I think it's possible that the winds could be well over that, maybe 75 to 90 miles per hour as that eye wall comes in. Also 60 to 75 mile per hour wind late this afternoon and going through the early evening in New Orleans. It's going to be a period of a few to several hours, 3, 4, 5 hours of the very worst of the weather, and that moving up into Mississippi through this evening. But then you see on the back side of it, the winds actually do come down pretty quickly. Notice in Mobile, 60 to 75 mile per hour wind at 9 o'clock tonight. And let's get out to Chris Bruin. He is in South Alabama right now. And Chris, it's going to be, fast and furious, essentially. It's going to make it really different as compared to a lot of previous storms.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Thankfully, it is moving fast. But remember, that also has repercussions. It's not able to weaken as quickly inland, which is why this is going to be a huge inland wind event, which will be very noticeable. We're already getting some of those outer bands. I want to show you the clouds. They do certainly are visible here on the horizon out over the water, which is an angry Gulf of Mexico. Wave heights easily 6 to 10 feet. But as we pan over in this direction, the waves continue to get taller and taller. In fact, not too far away from the base of some of these concrete pilings here of the Gulf State Pier here in Gulf Shores, Alabama, that was ravaged by Hurricane Sally. And here we go again, 6 weeks later, and another hurricane looming for the northern Gulf Coast.
Welcome to the Quaker Breakfast Table.
And welcome back to our ongoing coverage of Hurricane Zeta, now a 105 mile per hour storm, category 2 intensity. It has been getting a little bit stronger through the last few hours, and we are looking at a very serious threat for wind and surge in the parts of Mississippi and Louisiana in particular, also in Alabama. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. I want to show you the radar right now as this eye wall is not very far away. It's getting closer and closer to the point of landfall. Now just probably a couple of hours away from that. Some of the oil platforms offshore showing winds gusting to hurricane force, but we're seeing much stronger wind than that in the Doppler radar estimates. And you notice here in Homa, which is south of New Orleans, winds gusting to 50 miles per hour in those heavier bands that are coming on shore. That is knocking on the door there in New Orleans. So even though you've got winds of 21 right now, I think they're going to step up dramatically in the next hour or two and continue to worsen over the next several hours. And in fact, when we look at the eye wall there, that eye wall is now about 80 miles away from New Orleans, and it looks like it's going to come very, very close, if not actually right over New Orleans. And so assuming that the storm is not weakening that dramatically, because of course you've got all of that low-lying terrain there and marshland. It's what we call the brown ocean. There's a lot of water that's intermingled within the land there in southeast Louisiana. So assuming that the storm still has a lot of intensity, we could easily be looking at some exceptionally strong wind coming into New Orleans. As I say, it's going to be stepping up over the next several hours. Winds probably getting to 40 to 50 to 60 miles per hour. But as that eye wall comes in, on that present speed at 21 miles per hour, that would mean the eye wall moving into or very close to New Orleans in about 4 hours or so. And as that happens, that's when winds could easily gust over hurricane force. So you're talking about a very intense storm on the way. There in those deep blue colors, look at that, some velocities of 114 miles per hour aloft. And so easily looking at some winds of 100 plus miles per hour at the surface. All right, let's get out to Chris Bruin right now. He's been reporting on the storm in Gulf Shores. And Chris, this is going to be just a very fast storm, but with that fast motion, everything's going to worsen really quickly. So, we hope that people have gotten everything in order at this point, especially in southeast Louisiana, but even in Alabama, you're running out of time.
Yeah, Carl, you bring up a good point. Schools were dismissed early today in both Gulf Shores and even in Mobile. And the beaches have been essentially empty. We've had maybe 5 people that we have seen on these whole stretch of sand. So people, are at their safe place and they know a storm's coming. I think it will take people by surprise how quickly the weather changes. I want to bring in one of the locals here. It's the GM of our hotel, the Lodge, Bill Bennett. Thanks for joining us. Your property really looks good after what it went through in Hurricane Sally. Talk to us on some of the repairs and some of the things that you guys have faced this hurricane season alone.
Well, thanks, Chris. Really appreciate that. The facility performed as designed, candidly. We had minimal damage from Hurricane Sally. Some of the wind gusts through here were anywhere from 120, 130 mile an hour. And when you look at the length of time that storm, the duration of that storm, we had anticipated a little worse damage for the wear. Primarily cosmetic damage on the side of the building. Other than that, the hotel never closed, our restaurants never closed, and we actually served as a beacon of hope for many in this community. We transitioned our restaurant for 2 weeks following Hurricane Sally. We fed all the first responders. The Alabama State Park strike team came to town to clean up the state park itself. So we really performed well. The hotel performed so well and as designed, as you may know, it was the first commercial fortified building in the world, that 3 days after Hurricane Sally, the executive director for FEMA came through here along with Congressman Burns because he wanted to see what commercial fortified development actually looked like.
That's amazing. I mean, this place is a fortress. This place is a fortress. Talk about this season. And even though you had one direct impact, you've been threatened by many more. How has that process been, and how has this whole summer has it taken a toll on the industry, tourism industry? I mean, golf's sort of a popular spot even for Midwesterners. What have you experienced with that?
Well, many in this area have stopped subscribing to reality quite some time ago. It's totally overrated. We're in a bit of a bubble here. Yeah. This summer was very, very good for us, very, very strong. We saw strong leisure activity in all of our condominiums and all the hotels through here. So it was a little different. This is what, the 7th named storm?
Yeah.
But listen, if you want to live in paradise, you want to work in paradise, you got to be prepared for that. And we're such a resilient bunch down here.
We got about 30 seconds. How prepared do you feel for this incoming storm that we're about to threat with Zeta?
We feel very prepared. We have our team members that are here ready to carry on operations. The city, the community has been prepared for this as well.
All right.
So,
Bill Bennett, thank you so much. I mean, the hotel, we'll show you guys throughout the afternoon, and this is where we're hunkering down. This place is just a fortress and survived the high winds that we had with Sally. I mean, unbelievable stuff, but we're already seeing the weather change. We got another band coming in, and take a look here at the angry Gulf of Mexico behind me. You can see the remnants of what Sally did there in the distance, and we're gonna go through this all over again. Thankfully not as strong, but certainly gonna be impacted. We'll have more updates next.
But another one shows you over towards Lake Pontchartrain. Now, we think about Pontchartrain, it is some 630 square miles of water. The deepest points anywhere from, say, 12 to 14 feet, with some other places that have been dredged out a little bit deeper for large ships to move on through. But what is sailing in the direction, again, it is all about Zeta. We've already seen the formation of some tornadic activity, and that may be just really a taste of what's to come over the next several hours. And surely what we've seen over here in downtown New Orleans is pretty much a change too, where we had light to moderate showers, heavier rain coming in for the time being. Meteorologist Paul Goodlow is going to be coming up the next hour, talking about the conditions as we go minute by minute, hour by hour, with things that, as we mentioned, are only going to get worse. Rain, although it is prevalent now, is not going to be the top story. Because it is a quick mover, we don't anticipate a great deal of flooding from that. Flooding, though, still in the picture, primarily because of surge, that wind causing the water to pile up. So spots that we showed you along places like Lake Pontchartrain, it's going to be an issue, but also farther down along the coast, a lot of places like Grand Isle certainly could be affected. Parts of Highway 1 could be covered completely with water, making trying to get out of there not just a difficult endeavor, but at times downright impossible. So that is something you certainly need to contend with. The wind, again, we expect that to pick up, but something else, if you want to find a silver lining, is that we do anticipate this is going to be a fast mover. However, enough instability will stay in place, and we could see that tornadic threat roll on a bit more into places like Alabama, eventually back into Georgia, Tennessee, and the Carolinas. But also at the same time, we could have widespread power outages from the strong wind, possibly causing some tree damage and causing, again, a lot of covering of roadways. I unfortunately am technologically challenged at this moment. I'm unable to hear back into the control room at this point. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to hopefully hand it off back into the studio for more continued coverage at this hour.
Thank you so much. And what we are seeing on radar right now is that the eye wall, the very most dangerous part of this Category 2 storm, is now probably between 3 and 4 hours away from New Orleans. And so it is going to be very rough there in New Orleans later this afternoon. Already conditions starting to go downhill. Winds are picking up just to the south. Here we're looking at some of the observations, a couple of oil platforms. And you notice here that while we're seeing some updates on some of these other sites, we're not seeing updates on those. So I think that maybe their wind instrumentation has been knocked out, peaking there at about hurricane force. But here, as we look a little bit closer, we see that in Homa, winds are gusting to nearly 50 miles per hour and more recently gusting to 35 in New Orleans. And so as this banding, as this heavier rain comes in, that is really going to step up the wind. So over the next few hours, it's only going to be increasing. Winds gusting into the 40s, into the 50s, into the 60s. But then beyond that, we're watching this eye wall, and it looks like this eye wall is taking pretty much direct aim on New Orleans. And so as that comes in, there's going to be some very strong wind, hurricane force winds, gusting well over hurricane force potentially, coming right into New Orleans. And I think on the current track, probably getting in between 3 and 4 hours. It's moving at 20 miles per hour, so that would suggest between 3 and 4 hours is when the very worst of that weather comes in along with that eye wall. Now, we will see some degradation in the eye wall as it's moving up through southeast Louisiana, but this is also a very, swampy area. There's a lot of marshland there across southeast Louisiana, so it's not going to lose as much intensity as it might coming into other areas of land around the country. It's going to be able to hold on to a lot of that power. You can see here in the velocity data, you notice the very deep blue colors. That is now just about ready to come on board there, moving into Terrebonne Bay and moving towards Port Fourchon as well. Grand Isle, I think you're going to be in for some exceptionally strong wind in the next hour or so. So far, the storm surge values have not been that high, so it's going to be a sudden increase in everything, a sudden increase in wind and a sudden increase in storm surge. And we're looking at 4 to 7 feet from, say, Terrebonne and Plaquemines Parish on northward, and then 6 to 9 feet of storm surge potentially along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. So please, please listen to your local officials if they tell you to evacuate. Tropical storm warnings extending well inland all the way up into North Georgia and even into the Carolinas. This thing is going to hold on to a lot of its intensity well after landfall. It will be a tropical storm all the way up into Georgia and North and South Carolina. Here you see the wind moving into Montgomery and Birmingham late tonight and then coming into the Atlanta metro early tomorrow morning, and there could be significant tree and power line damage in those areas. Much more coming up.
And so it begins right now. We're beginning the landfall of the 11th tropical system to make landfall here in the U.S. just this year. Powerful Category 2 Hurricane Zeta now is lashing the Louisiana coastline and even here in New Orleans. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodlow. Thanks for staying with us for our coverage all day, all night, and into the rest of this week as we deal with yet another threat to the U.S. from this wild year of 2020. We have live team coverage up and down the coast as we time out this life-threatening storm surge, wind, as not to mention the rain and the flooding potential as well. And all this moves inland, and so do many of the impacts as well across much of the southeastern U.S. as Zeta comes on shore over the next several hours of very strong winds. Right now, again, Zeta is a Category 2 hurricane, sustained winds 105 miles per hour, and is closing in the Louisiana coastline, moving north-northeast at 21 miles per hour. That forward speed has been increasing throughout the day and is continue to expect to go faster and faster, which means the time is running out. Hopefully you're in your safe place and you will stay there with your supplies, because we are literally about maybe 90, 95 miles out from the center, but we're about 60 miles out from severe weather. Let's talk more about this, because I'm going to bring in our storm specialist, Carl Parker. And Carl, I've been looking at this thing on satellite, quite impressive. It has regained an eye, and this thing is looking very strong moments before landfall.
Yeah, Paul, you know, intensity forecasting is very, very difficult, and this is a case in point. A lot of the modeling indicating that the storm would be leveling out as it approached the northern Gulf Coast, and instead the opposite has occurred. It's gone from 90 miles per hour to now 110, so a very strong Category 2, now just 1 mile per hour shy of being a major hurricane. This is a very serious storm. It's going to be a serious wind maker. It's moving very quickly, and when it comes in, it's going to be fierce, people. And it's going to be moving into New Orleans, most likely in about 3 hours or so. Now moving north-northeast at 22 miles per hour, so it's accelerating right now. And by the time it gets up into the vicinity of the Mississippi Gulf Coast, it's probably going to be moving at somewhere closer to 30 miles per hour. And that eye wall is now just about ready to move in. It is not very far at all from moving in. There you see some of the current wind readings. And so the hallmark of this event is going to be a rapid deterioration in conditions. Winds now gusting to 35 in New Orleans, gusting to 50 in Homa, though we haven't seen any change in that observation. So I'm wondering if that station is still reporting gusting to 37 in Buras. But some of the oil platforms offshore showing winds over 90 miles per hour. And that eye wall is where the very worst of that weather is. And I think that that is going to be taking aim on New Orleans. You see the heavier rain that's coming in now. As more of that comes in over the next few hours, that will be stepping up the wind. So winds gusting increasingly into the 40s and the 50s and the 60s there in New Orleans. But as we look at that eye wall, the northern edge of that eye wall is now about 60 miles away from New Orleans. And so on its current speed, that would imply that that northern eye wall is going to be getting into New Orleans inside of 3 hours. And so when that happens, it's already going to be very bad leading up to that moment. But when that eye wall comes in, and it's probably going to be largely intact because you've got a lot of what we call brown ocean in southeast Louisiana, a lot of wetlands, a lot of marshland. It's probably not going to weaken that dramatically after coming on shore in Louisiana. So I think we're going to be in for a really significant wind event in New Orleans. So please, folks, you need to get to your shelters right away. In the next 30 minutes to an hour as that eye wall continues to move in. So I want to show you a model forecast showing the wind speeds here. And keep in mind that these model forecasts are not necessarily always exactly right. And because the model is based on perhaps the intensity a little while ago and the intensity has been increasing, it might not be as high as what is actually going to happen. I think we're going to see winds over 75 miles per hour in Grand Isle and possibly in New Orleans as well. Then up and certainly wind gusts over hurricane force. And then into southern Mississippi, I think that is also going to be the case. So I think these values are probably a little low relative to what's been happening with the storm in the last couple of hours. And that strong wind then coming up into Mobile by 9 o'clock tonight. And then by later tonight, things do rapidly improve because the storm is going to be moving so quickly. But look at this. Look at the tropical storm warnings, how far northeast they extend up into North Georgia, into the Carolinas as well. So as we follow those winds, those coming up into Atlanta by tomorrow morning, very early in the morning before the sun comes up, and there could very well be widespread tree and power line damage. Birmingham, Montgomery, into Atlanta, into North Georgia, into the western part of the Carolinas as well, especially as you get up in higher elevations where winds might gust 40 to 60 miles per hour. In Atlanta, it might be more like 70 to 80 as you get up in higher elevations. And that strong wind, Chris, making its way all the way into Virginia and North Carolina by tomorrow afternoon and tomorrow evening. So this thing is going to be packing a punch much farther inland than almost every one of the previous storms that we've seen this season.
Yeah, it is so strong coming onshore, and it has all that momentum. So, yeah, unexpected, perhaps for a lot of people who aren't paying attention. This is going to be a big punch of wind well inland, state or two, maybe 3 or 4 away from where it makes landfall. Before it makes landfall, all of that wind pushing that Gulf water into Florida, into Alabama, into Mississippi, and, of course, into Louisiana, including New Orleans, with Lake Pontchartrain also a factor. Here are some of the latest storm surge flooding gauges here. Everything under a foot so far. Some little bit of rises here. This is expected over the next few hours to increase dramatically. In fact, the forecast here shows from the Big Bend of Florida over to the far western part of the Panhandle, 1 to 3. That's what we're talking about, the storm surge, the water above normally high ground. Then you get to 2 to 4. 3 to 5 feet, so getting up to about 5 feet, and then 6 to 9 feet of water getting up over what would normally be dry ground, and that includes the entire coastline here of Mississippi, and some significant flooding also expected. This is the ocean water, the salt water surging onshore, and also taking into account the fact that there's a high tide cycle coming up. So that's what we're looking at here. This is the high tide cycle for Grand Isle, Louisiana. We are going to be watching the low tide change over to high tide from 4:27 to 10:37 with, and keep in mind, with that landfall happening somewhere in here as we approach the high tide, getting closer to that. So keep that in mind as we have already seen these winds picking up and all of these winds pushing that water onshore. So the stronger the winds, the more water that's going to push, and the longer it lasts, the longer the duration of the event. And the extent of it inland as well. The maximum wind potential, so 40 plus. So we're talking anywhere in yellow, tropical storm force winds or even stronger gusts. So this isn't the max. You can still see gusts 50, possibly 60 miles an hour well inland. But again, the stronger gusts here existing all the way up to the Carolinas, mountainous Carolinas. And you get up in elevation, even stronger, and into Virginia, and then eventually off the mid-Atlantic, the eastern seaboard here. But when to expect it? So going into this afternoon, going into tonight, the overnight hours after dark for most of Alabama, and then getting into Georgia in the after midnight hours, and then Georgia into the Carolinas from about daybreak into early to mid-morning. And some of these winds are impressive. Gulfport, we could be seeing these winds up to 90 miles an hour. New Orleans also expected to see these winds really pick up. And the city has been spared so far this season, but that is expected to change with Zeta, and meteorologist Paul Goodlow is there live in New Orleans. Paul.
Yeah, Chris, again, it's been years since New Orleans has been directly impacted. The closest call from a hurricane was 3 years ago with Hurricane Nate, and that was about 50 miles from here in the city. But this city is not going to escape this. We're already feeling some of the gusty winds, and this is going to be a unique impact. We think about New Orleans being below sea level and vulnerable to flooding and storm surge. That's still an issue. We can still see some areas picking up, 4 or 5 inches of rain here, but the power outages because of these winds. See some of the beautiful palm trees here on Canal Street. They are already whipping right now. Even things in the balconies, they are swaying. And we're barely getting towards tropical storm force wind gusts, but we're going to see that eye wall come through, and maybe even the eye here. So our winds will continue to increase as we head throughout probably 9, 10 o'clock tonight, and then things will, as the rain pulls away, will slowly wind down towards the morning, and then the sun comes out pretty quickly tomorrow. But these winds, power outages will be one of the biggest impacts we'll have here in New Orleans, things that perhaps people haven't dealt with, trees coming down, power coming down, and then that leads to the flood concern, because if you start losing power, you start losing the ability to pump some of this rainwater up and out of the city, which sits below sea level. So that's kind of a side impact. We won't have as much rain in terms of just the rain itself causing flooding. It's the lack of power pumping the rain out. That's one of the biggest concerns we'll have. And people could be out without power for a couple of days. So hopefully they are preparing for this. And the good news is this comes in and comes out. This time tomorrow, perhaps we're just continuing the cleanup with plenty of sunshine overhead, but tonight is the night just to basically settle down and kind of ride this one out in your safe place. But it's not just an impact here. We're going to have impacts all along the Gulf Coast. Let's head to Chris Bruin. He is in Gulf Shores, Alabama. And Chris, Gulf Shores, they're still recovering from what happened with Hurricane Sally. They had massive impacts from the storm surge there.
Yeah, just in 6 weeks, it's amazing how much progress they've been able to make, Paul. I know you were riding out Sally here in Gulf Shores, but there's still a lot visible from the destruction that Sally caused. So there's debris piles, there's downed trees, there's tarps on roofs, especially when you go inland towards Foley and areas outside of Mobile. So they're going to have to contend with that. And even though we're not going to get the strongest winds here like we're going to see in New Orleans, we are going to see some big impacts. This is a fast-moving storm. It's going to be, enhanced by our front and the jet energy that will get sucked up to it. And that's going to pose problems. And remember, we're on the east side of this. So we got the severe weather potential and also the onshore push, which is what we've been seeing pretty much all morning. The surge will continue. Right now we're seeing water level rise above dry ground anywhere from a half foot to a foot across parts of the coastal Alabama and also the Florida Panhandle, but we expect that to get upwards of 3 to 5 feet, in some cases a little bit higher. I want to pan off in this direction, though, towards Mississippi and also towards New Orleans, and you can certainly see the darkening skies. We've got about a 30-ish mile stretch where it's pretty dry, and then you get into those core bands, and that's when the winds really start to pick up. So we expect the rain to really pick up here around Mobile and coastal Alabama, say in the next 3 to 4 hours, and then tonight is really the night it goes downhill. Carl, we're expecting those power outages, winds anywhere 50, 60, even upwards of 70 miles per hour, and it's something we're going to have to watch for very closely. And then we go inland. By tomorrow morning, Carl, we're looking at winds over hurricane, 60, 70 miles up in Atlanta.
Yeah, it's going to be a really scary time, most likely overnight tonight, early tomorrow morning, even into tomorrow afternoon. And I want to show you the power outage forecast because these impacts extending well inland as the storm will be accelerating. Talking about widespread power outages, obviously from New Orleans up to Mobile and in southern Mississippi, but then into Montgomery, maybe into Birmingham. That's going to be overnight tonight, into Atlanta in the very early morning hours. A lot of the trees still have many of their leaves. It has not been that cold in the southeast, and so there are many, many trees that are fully leafed at this point, or nearly so, and that's going to catch a lot more wind. It's going to make those trees come down a lot more easily. So widespread power outages all the way up into the mountains there. And another thing to consider is that if you're at elevation in North Georgia, in western North Carolina, western South Carolina, certainly that too is going to be a factor. The winds are going to be even stronger, where in the lower elevations, winds might be 50, 60 miles per hour. Up in the mountains, they could be 70 to 80 miles per hour on the high end. And we're going to see those power outages all the way up into Virginia and also into South Carolina. All of this because there's a very powerful jet stream. It's going to capture the storm and whisk it off to the northeast. And so looking at the forecast, the wind gust forecast, you see those strong winds moving into Montgomery. That is 2 o'clock in the morning there. Then into Atlanta, 5 o'clock in the morning. Could very well be a really difficult drive into work. If you can delay that, that would be helpful. Then into the middle of the day, Charlotte, as well as Asheville, and then Raleigh, North Carolina in the early afternoon. So you see this thing is just racing along. And by this time tomorrow, we expect that it's going to be up into Tidewater, Virginia, and the eastern part of North Carolina, still producing potential for power outages and tree damage. And our team coverage on this very dangerous Category 2 storm continuing in a moment.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel. We are tracking Hurricane Zeta, which is moments from making landfall on the Louisiana coast, the 11th hurricane and tropical system to make landfall here in the U.S. Looking live in Leeville, Louisiana. This is the road to Grand Isle, and you can see that water getting closer and closer to covering the road. That's why people were urged to evacuate with the mandatory evacuation there. Some people are probably still trying to ride that out there, but you cannot safely get there to and from there because the winds and the water continue to increase. And that's one of the biggest concerns we have here is the storm surge and the winds. This is a unique threat that we haven't faced in a long time here in New Orleans and Louisiana, southeast Louisiana, as direct landfall of a hurricane. Right now, Hurricane Zeta is a Category 2 hurricane. The sustained winds are at 110 miles per hour, and we're getting closer and closer to that center point here in New Orleans. I'm on Canal Street here, where we got plenty of palm trees. You can see them swaying. The light posts are swaying as well, and we are still a couple of hours away from the strongest winds, which are wrapped up in that center eye wall of Zeta, which is forecast to come basically right over New Orleans. If it misses, it might miss by a mile or two just off to the east, which means we're going to be in that eye wall the entire duration, which is, I don't know if it's even any better than having a little respite from the center of the storm coming on through there. But wind as well as rain, some of the biggest impacts, and power outages. See everything kind of blowing in the wind here, and we're going to see these winds perhaps double or triple or quadruple cause power outages and perhaps even structural damage. The good news is it comes in, comes out. The winds start to die down even by midnight, but still breezy throughout Thursday. But at least we'll start drying out and have the sun return. But we're going to be in the thick of this for the rest of the evening. I guess the only upside, Carl, is we're going to be dealing with some of this and some of the strongest winds while the sun is still up this evening. So maybe we can see any damage that could be coming our way. But it's going to be a long evening here in the
Strong Category 2, just a shade away from being a Category 3 or a major hurricane, now moving north-northeast at 22 miles per hour. So it continues to accelerate, and that northern eye wall is beginning to move into Terrebonne Bay. Right now, the winds gusting most recently to 48 miles per hour in Homa, though I'll tell you that observation has not changed for a while now, so I'm wondering if that instrumentation has been damaged. Now gusting to 33 miles per hour in New Orleans, and so we're going to see it really stepping up as more of this banding comes in. You see that yellow color right there. As more of that comes up into New Orleans, the winds will be stepping up over the next couple of hours into the 40s, into the 50s, into the 60s. And then eventually that eye wall, it looks like that eye wall is going to be taking aim on New Orleans, and now less than 60 miles away. So probably somewhere between 2 to 3 hours from now is when the very worst of the weather is going to come into New Orleans. And, you know, keep in mind that unlike in a lot of cases where you have a landfalling hurricane, it begins to weaken because it's over land. In this case, you know, land in southeast Louisiana is not really land, as you know. It's a lot of marshland, and so that's going to allow the storm to stay a little bit stronger, a little bit longer. So I think this is going to be a significant wind event for New Orleans. And here, by the way, look at that velocity right there. Wow, that is 140 mile per hour wind. Now that's off the ground. That's several thousand feet up in the air, but still, you know, a significant fraction of that can be transferred down to the ground. So that's easily over 100 mile per hour wind that's occurring at the surface. And that deep blue color right now is just about on top of Port Fourchon and not far away from Grand Isle. Things are going to get much, much worse there in very short order. And so looking at the model forecast, and I'll tell you, I do think that this model is probably not aggressive enough going through the next couple of hours here. We see exceptionally strong wind coming into New Orleans. I think they could easily be gusting over 75 miles per hour in Grand Isle as well as New Orleans. Same story there in Gulfport and Biloxi. Then we do see winds over 75 in Gulfport going into 8 o'clock tonight, and that wind coming up into Mobile by the time we get into 9 o'clock tonight. So, Paul, you know, hopefully everybody is listening there in New Orleans, because we're going to see a rapid decline in conditions in New Orleans over the next few hours.
Yeah, we certainly will here. And again, it's not just here in downtown the business district. We have all types of neighborhoods, beautiful trees. That wind will be an issue. But also on the north side of town, we have Lake Pontchartrain. We have a storm path camera up there at the New Canal Lighthouse, and you can see the wave action already on the lake here. So the West End neighborhoods, areas outside the Levee Protection District are definitely vulnerable to that storm surge. And also the wind, the wave action, the wind just physically pushing that water on the south and west side of the lake. So it's a big concern for just the winds blowing that water as well as the storm surge coming in as well. The timing here in New Orleans is basically now through about 10 or 11 o'clock will be the worst of it, and perhaps that center coming through between 7 and 9 p.m. And heavy rain along these winds. If you have trees around, you could be losing them in power tonight.
Hurricane Zeta making a beeline for the Gulf Coast at a rapid pace.
No matter how fatigued we all are, it does not reduce the threat coming at us.
We need folks to prepare now, get the supplies that we need, make a plan, stay safe, stay home.
Welcome back to Weather Channel. We are tracking Hurricane Zeta making landfall as we speak. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodall live along Canal Street here in New Orleans, where the rain has been coming down all day long and the winds now really starting to whip. Latest report, 35-mile-per-hour wind gusts, but we're getting some consistent wind gusts well over 30 miles per hour, and those will continue to increase as Zeta continues to move onshore and most likely move right over portions of the city of New Orleans. We have not been directly hit by a hurricane in a long time. The closest within 50 miles was 3 years ago with Hurricane Nate, a far weaker storm than now Category 2 Hurricane Zeta here. One of the biggest threats you think with New Orleans is flooding. Of course, that's an issue with storm surge, but it's now going to be the wind. A Category 2 hurricane making landfall brings a whole other set of threats here into the city with the gusty winds. Here, Canal Street, one of the widest streets in the country. You got some palm trees here, which are taking a beating right now, but the winds easily going to double, if not triple. And there are a lot of more narrow streets here, beautiful homes, beautiful tree-lined streets, trees coming down, power coming down. I think the power outages and the wind damage is going to be probably the biggest calling card Zeta will bring. And again, Chris, he'll be bringing that for the rest of today, probably up until late tonight, closing in at midnight before things will slowly start to wind down. But the breeze will stay even into tomorrow, which could hamper and delay even restoring power to the close to 400,000 people who call New Orleans and the city of New Orleans home. Chris?
And Paul, right now, as Hurricane Zeta makes its way closer to land, a powerful storm, here's what we know at the Weather Channel. 20 million people in the cone of Hurricane Zeta. Louisiana Governor John Bel Edwards says 1,500 National Guardsmen have been activated to respond to Zeta. Texas Governor Greg Abbott has also deployed resources to help Louisiana, and Alabama Governor Kay Ivey is urging residents to prepare now and stay off the roads tonight. And it is now just a matter of time now, not a lot of time left before this storm in earnest starts to pound New Orleans. And then from there, it will be making its way inland all the way up to the mid-Atlantic. Let's go to storm specialist Carl Parker right now, who's in the lab. And Carl, it's just a matter of time now. Not much time left to prepare at all.
No, there's not. And as a matter of fact, that northern eye wall is now coming into Terrebonne Bay and surrounding areas, and it's not very far away from New Orleans. You look at the structure of this thing, I do think there is some drier air coming in on the south side, so there's not as much eye wall there on the south side. It might pretty much be about the northern eye wall in terms of the worst of the effects of the storm. The worst wind from this storm may be triggered by that northern eye wall. And you notice here the wind's now gusting to 32 in New Orleans, so there's a very sharp gradient. Things are going to go downhill really quickly over the next few hours. And most recently, winds reported to 50 in Homa, though I haven't seen that observation change, so I suspect that we may have some problem with the instrumentation there. But you look at the northern eye wall, and it's now about 50 miles south of New Orleans, and the storm is moving at 22 miles per hour and likely accelerating. So now probably around 2 hours, maybe a touch longer than that before that northern eye wall comes into New Orleans. And that is where the very worst of the weather is going to be. Not that it won't be bad preceding that, it will. Winds will be gusting into the 40s and increasingly into the 50s and the 60s. But as that northern eye wall comes into New Orleans, we're going to see winds gusting over hurricane force and probably not only some trees down and power lines down, but probably some structural damage as well. So this is not very far away at all, folks. You are basically out of time there in New Orleans. Now, here you see the worst of the wind showing up in Doppler velocities. That's 120 miles per hour. That's off the ground, so that's not actually what's happening down at the surface, but a significant fraction of that is. So very easily 100+ mile per hour wind now coming towards Port Fourchon there just moments away and coming up towards Grand Isle as well. It's going to be really tough in parts of Terrebonne and Fourchon and also Plaquemines parishes. Right now we're not seeing significant water level rises, but I think that is going to change really dramatically as the storm is coming in, particularly in areas in eastern Louisiana and southern Mississippi. Up to 9 feet of surge expected along the Mississippi Gulf Coast. And we'll have much more on this dangerous storm coming up in a moment.
This year, Walmart's turning Black Friday into deals for days. Starting Wednesday, November 4th. Score.
And welcome back into the Weather Channel's continuing live coverage here of Hurricane Zeta. By the way, 6 miles per hour from becoming a major hurricane. So we got to watch this very closely. Things are going downhill quickly in Louisiana right now. New Orleans, we'll check back in with Paul here shortly. We're in Gulf Shores, Alabama. We're going to be getting impacts. Now, we're dry at the moment, but winds have noticeably picked up. I want to show you the palm trees. There's not many at Gulf State Park here right on the beach. Some of them were even taken out by Hurricane Sally 6 weeks ago, but notice the stiff breeze that's coming in, and notice how it's an onshore push. So we will have water rise. Right now it hasn't been too bad, and the difference between high and low tide is manageable. So the fact that this is coming in low tide doesn't mean a whole lot because the difference between the tides are only about a foot. But hey, a foot will be helpful, especially with this coming in the bulk at low tide for the most part. But waves, they're high, they're choppy, and they will get higher, all right? So we're gonna see a lot of this water likely come well inland and at least get up to the dunes. And these poor beaches here in the northern Gulf Coast have taken their fair share of beatings this season. Man, it has been exhausting. This is the 8th storm to impact the U.S. and just incredible, just to think about how close some of these areas have been with Sally making landfall 6 weeks ago, and then of course Lake Charles, Laura, and Delta. Now, as far as the forecast goes for here, we know rainfall will be minimal. We're looking at anywhere from 1 to 3 inches, but it's going to be a 4 to 5 hour period where we are going to have winds 40, 50, even upwards of 60 miles per hour. That will likely happen by dinner time tonight. So try and keep off the roads, traveling. Of course, many bridges here, Mobile and around southern Alabama, they're going to be likely very difficult, if not impassable, to travel at times, Carl, given the high winds and how quickly the weather will change. You may be driving and then all of a sudden, boom, a washout of a rainstorm and those winds that are going to take people by surprise. So now's the time to get inside, especially if you haven't already, as the weather will quickly go downhill.
Yeah, one of the important hallmarks of this storm, Chris, things stepping up very, very quickly. And in fact, we're seeing that now in southern Louisiana. Looking at the radar picture and the eye wall, that northern eye wall is coming on shore near Terrebonne Bay and also Lafourche Parish there. In fact, it may be getting close to making landfall. There are some barrier islands on the south side of Terrebonne Bay. So whether or not it officially makes landfall on one of those islands remains to be seen, but it's getting very close to doing that. And that very strong wind coming towards Port Fourchon, I think mostly an industrial area, but Grand Isle most recently reporting winds gusting to 87 miles per hour. And that's just outside of that eye wall. And that is what is coming for New Orleans. Right now, the wind's only gusting to 32 in New Orleans, 48 in Houma, though I tell you, we haven't gotten any update on that observation. So I think that instrument may be down at this point. But there you see that northern eye wall. That's the very most dangerous part of the storm, which is not to say that the weather ahead of that is not going to be dangerous. It is. We're going to see winds gusting 40, 50, 60, 70 miles per hour in those bands that are coming through New Orleans. That'll be stepping up as you get closer to the core of the storm, but it's that core of the storm where we're going to find the very strongest of winds. And again, in Grand Isle, which is now just outside of that eye wall, right in there, winds just gusting to 87 miles per hour. They're not even into the actual eye wall yet, and already gusting to nearly 90 miles per hour. So that is indicative of what is coming. Storm now moving at 22 miles per hour. So that suggests that 2 hours, maybe a little bit longer than that, is when we start to see a really rapid increase in wind. Again, it's going to be stronger prior to that. It's going to come up gradually in over the next few hours in that sense. But certainly as the eye wall comes in, that's where the very worst of the weather is going to be. And you can see that clearly on the Doppler here. You can see that dark coloring that is now coming up and towards Grand Isle and will be making its way towards New Orleans. Now, in the longer term, there's a really strong jet stream, and it's going to grab this thing and it's going to race off to the northeast. So it's not going to have time to weaken as it's brought well inland, and that's why tropical storm warnings are now in effect in Alabama and North Georgia and also into North and South Carolina. Here you see the wind gust forecast into Montgomery there overnight, and Chris, into Atlanta in the morning. Still a lot of trees, a lot of leaves on the trees, and that could well mean a lot of trees coming down and power outages as well.
Yeah, and this is over a huge metropolitan area that we're talking about here, so likely some major disruptions tomorrow, whether it is just trying to get around, how dangerous it's going to be with all the trees around. So when you walk out the front door before you go to bed tonight, try to look around and see what could come down, because that's a real possibility tonight. And if you have to, sleep on the lowest level of your home, away from where any trees may come down. And you can see how quickly this is moving. It's going to be coming on shore. It's already strong, and it's not going to essentially have a lot of time to weaken. When you're talking from right here, this evening to tomorrow morning, sunrise, it'll be working out of Georgia through parts of Tennessee and the Carolinas. So some of the more specific timing with this, as we see 8, 9, 10 o'clock, here's some of that heavier rain. Now several counties away from the coast. Midnight, this is clearing out. It's still going to be pretty nasty, but clearing out as far as the rain goes. Mobile, Biloxi, Gulfport, and the heaviest or the strongest of the winds will continue to pick up as this storm goes inland. So heads up, it's going to be a long night with a very fast-moving storm. Hurricane Zeta. Of course, we have team coverage.
Eat the news.
Of this very dangerous storm, now as strong a Category 2 hurricane with winds of 110 miles per hour, now coming onshore in southeast Louisiana. We recently got a report of winds gusting to 87 miles per hour in Grand Isle as that eye wall is just about now moving in. The eye itself coming into Terrebonne Bay and Terrebonne and Lafourche parishes, and now not very far away at all from New Orleans, probably between 2 and 3 hours before that eye wall comes in, which is not to say that the weather is going to be fine prior to that. It's going to be getting progressively worse. Winds most recently gusting up to about 35 miles per hour in the high end. But over the next couple of hours, you'll see wind gusts in the 40s, and then the 50s, and then the 60s, and the 70s. And then as that eye wall comes in, then it's going to get a whole lot worse, most likely. And I think we're going to see widespread winds of hurricane force there in the New Orleans area. There you see the current winds gusting to 33, 31 miles per hour. more. But there is that eye wall now about the northern end of that eye wall, about 50 miles to the south of New Orleans. And the storm is moving at 22 miles per hour. So that would bring it in again between 2 and 3 hours. And here you see in Grand Isle, that deep blue color, that's the eye wall showing you where very, very strong wind has been coming in there. Now, in the longer term, there's a very strong jet stream, and that's going to grab this thing and rapidly take it off to the north. So as it's being whisked off to the northeast, it's not going to be weakening that quickly relative to that fast forward speed. It will be a tropical storm as it comes up into Alabama and Georgia and the Carolinas. So we expect to see widespread power outages in Alabama and North Georgia, as well as into potentially parts of the Carolinas. Keep in mind that a lot of the trees still have a lot of leaves on them, so they're going to be catching the wind more easily. That's going to bring down branches. It's going to bring down entire trees, and power outages are going to be a pretty good possibility starting overnight tonight, really starting now, of course, right where the system is coming on shore, but then well inland overnight tonight as that wind field, that area of strong wind gusts comes up into south central Alabama. So Montgomery and Birmingham getting in on that exceptionally strong wind. That then moving into Atlanta in the very early morning hours and continuing through, say, sunup and the morning rush. So if you can delay your start tomorrow, that would be the best policy because, again, there could be trees down in many areas. And then that strong wind will come over into North and South Carolina going through the middle of the day tomorrow. Charlotte, seeing that, the triad there, as well as into Raleigh in the early afternoon. And then even tomorrow afternoon, so just 24 hours from now, we watch that strong wind coming into Southeast Virginia as well as into eastern parts of North Carolina. So a significant threat well inland, and that's why the tropical storm warnings are now in effect across parts of Alabama and North Georgia and also into North and South Carolina. The storm not performing precisely as had been forecast. We do see winds now of 110 miles per hour, Category 2 hurricane, and so a significant wind threat coming towards New Orleans. We want to get out to Paul Goodloe. He is in New Orleans right now. And Paul, I think things really stepping up over the next couple of hours and probably in about two and a half hours.
Definitely. In fact, but the last, say, half hour, Carl, we've seen the wind increasing here as well as the rain as well. And the strongest winds are also wrapped up in some of the heaviest rain, which we are getting basically now for the next 2.5 hours. We're going through weather that will continue to get increasingly bad. Stronger winds, heavier rain coming on through here. And then we get to the eye wall, which would probably be the worst of Hurricane Zeta. So if you're in the area, wherever you are, you need to stay put because things will continue to go downhill as we're seeing these strong easterly winds coming on through here. It continues to give us a lot of heavy rain and the strongest winds. Again, winds gusting 30, 40, 50 miles per hour will continue through the next hour. And then after that, we start getting 60, 70, maybe 80 to 100 mile per hour wind gusts. Again, this is a Category 2 hurricane we're dealing with here with Hurricane Zeta. It continues to be a huge concern. We have not had that type of impact here with a tropical system in years in terms of direct landfall.
Into New Orleans in about 2 hours. Conditions going downhill throughout the next 2 hours. We are going to continue our coverage of this very dangerous storm for Louisiana and much of the Southeast. That'll be coming up in just a few minutes. Stay with us.
You hate coming home to a dark house, and you're uptight about noises outside.
Welcome in, everyone. You are taking a live look at New Orleans, Louisiana. Hurricane Zeta expected to make landfall imminently. It's now pushing its way along the coastline of Louisiana. Strong Category 2 hurricane, the 5th named storm to make landfall in Louisiana this year. We've got live team coverage for you tonight, showing you everything you need to know about this hurricane. As it is strengthened throughout the day, it has rapidly intensified, poses a very serious threat to the northern Gulf Coast as well as much of the southeast, where we're expecting extensive power outages that may extend all the way into the Carolinas and beyond. Again, you can see what it looks like over New Orleans right now, where the skies are dark, the winds are starting to pick up, and we are looking at a very serious threat. We've gotten a new advisory in from the National Hurricane Center. Winds are still very look at New Orleans, you can see that the signs on the buildings here are starting to flap and come undone just a little bit here. You can see how the palms are starting to sway just a little bit. The rain's going to pick up in intensity here as the northern eye wall likely to slam us here in New Orleans. People, you're urged right now to remain off the streets, to hunker down right now and ride this storm out. It's not going to be a long-lived event. The storm's moving very quickly at 24 miles per hour forward speed, so we think it'll only be a couple of hours and it'll be gone. So a lot of things to consider for you this evening as the eye is basically at this point very near Port Fourchon right here and basically coming over a National Wildlife Refuge at this point. It'll come across Highway 1 and then eventually, we believe, right over New Orleans, Lake Pontchartrain, then race its way through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and beyond. But we are anticipating a very hard hit tonight. Location right now officially is 65 miles south-southwest of New Orleans, but likely to be in New Orleans within the next 2 to 3 hours. And we think that it could, again, come in as about at least 100 to 110 mile per hour hurricane over New Orleans. Could weaken just a hair before it gets into New Orleans, but at this point it has been a very intense hurricane. We're going to show you what's going on with this thing because for many of you it becomes potentially a life-threatening event, especially when you consider the storm surge here into Mississippi, into Alabama, where it could be as high as 9 feet. There's a look at your forecast track, and you see how quickly it moves. By Thursday morning, already around Birmingham and Montgomery, there's a look at the radar, already gusting New Orleans at 37 miles per hour, 45 in bursts. Let's take you to base St. Louis in Mississippi. Our Justin Michaels is there for us this evening. Justin, we think that we could get very intense winds as well as a fairly significant storm surge there.
Yeah, the storm surge is probably the biggest concern for people here, Mike, but also the winds. Could we actually see the eastern eye wall of Hurricane Zeta when it's going to still be a very strong Category 1 hurricane? That is definitely a possibility here in Bay St. Louis, meaning now is the time to get to your safe places, stay inside, and do not go outside until sometime tomorrow when you can start to assess damage. But follow me this way. About that storm surge, we're going to walk down the day pier here at the marina, and it's already coming in. In fact, you can see here in the harbor, the water is already coming up. I should be able to walk out to the end of the pier. It's completely underwater at this point, and that water continues to rise. Could we have 6 to 9 feet of storm surge here in Bay St. Louis? That is a great concern. And let me point out a few markers to give you an idea of what that would mean. You can still see several boats are in this harbor. That's very concerning because if they were to break loose, look at the size of some of them, nothing would stand in its way. They would basically go through anything that it would come across. The good news is there's a very large seawall, a very large levee here, 24 feet high, not going to get through that. But those pylons out there, the ends of those piers, they're about 9 feet from the water right now. They're going to come up. So if the water does get up that high, you're not going to see them anymore, and the boats are going to be above them. That's a huge concern for the harbor master here. Now, to give you some perspective on where we are geographically, way out there beyond the train bridge is the Gulf of Mexico and Mississippi Sound. And then if you follow me up this way, you can see the downtown area of Bay St. Louis. That's where all the restaurants and beds and breakfasts and all sorts of things are. And then over here is the actual Bay of St. Louis. Now, it's really interesting because there is all this activity, whitecaps over here, the beach, the waves are coming in, and the water is beginning to rise up. And if you look over here in the protected harbor, it's much calmer because there is a break out there. There's a storm break, a concrete storm break. In fact, Matt, can you see the end of it? And you can actually see the water coming up over it a little bit. Now, timing tonight. What can we expect? Well, the expectation is, could we see the eastern eye wall, the absolute worst part of the storm here in Bay St. Louis? Yes is the answer to that. And when's it going to happen? Sometime after dinner time locally. Okay, so maybe between 6 and 10 o'clock tonight, could we see those Cat 1 hurricane force winds over 75 miles per hour or even much higher than that as it approaches that Cat 2 level? It's certainly possible. But somebody who's going to get it before us, Paul Goodloe and his crew there in New Orleans. Paul, I know, I've been listening to you. Conditions continue to deteriorate. Basically, what's happening to you, we're going to be listening because it's going to be coming to us. How are you guys doing there, Paul?
We're hanging in there the best we can. We're starting to deal with more and more of the stronger winds coming in, and they're kind of wrapped in some of the heavier rain bands. It's been dumping rain the last hour or so. We're still about, say, 2.5 hours away from that center coming on through here, and it's been the hurricane has been rapidly moving faster and faster. So 17, 18, 21, 22 plus miles per hour in forward speed here. So it continues to bring some of the worst weather into New Orleans, and as our gusts have been approaching and exceeding 40 miles per hour, we're going to see perhaps those wind gusts at least double, if not more, as we head on through the next, say, 2.5 to even 3 hours before the center comes through, and some of the strongest winds, and those are the ones that could be Cat 1, maybe even Cat 2 hurricane force winds gusting right on through downtown New Orleans. Now, again, New Orleans, you think about the hurricane history here. You think back to Katrina and the catastrophe, the flooding from many areas of the city here. But this is going to be a unique hit in terms of New Orleans because I think the wind will be the much bigger player than so much the rain. Yes, the rain's pretty intense right now. We can see 2 to 4 inches of rain. The pumps are up and working. There's a turbine just delivering power to some of them. But the main thing is the power. The wind's breaking down the tree. You see some of the palm trees here on Canal Street, which, by the way, is one of the biggest streets not only here in New Orleans, but in the country. Seeing your water rise, some areas over 2 feet. That's also a big concern, the storm surge, even on Lake Pontchartrain. So we have ongoing concerns here across New Orleans, and it's not just about the flood. It's also going to be about these strong winds which continue to lash this area. Now, if you're watching us from the New Orleans area, as bad as it is right now, it is going to continue to go downhill. We see a few folks out and about, but I'll tell you what, over the last 2 hours or so, we've seen a lot of people find their safe place and basically have not come back out here because even we see the fire department went down the street a little while ago with their sirens blaring, not quite sure what's going on. I know there's some buildings under construction, and that could be it as well. A lot of scaffolding up in some of these streets here in the French Quarter, and even the central business district here in downtown New Orleans. So it continues to be an evening of basically waiting and dealing with some of the strongest winds that we'll see here with Zeta over the next 2.5 to 3 hours. You know, the last time we had a hurricane get within 50 miles of making landfall here in New Orleans was 4 years ago with Hurricane Nate. Yeah, it's not going to be within 50 miles this time. It's going to be a direct hit with Hurricane Zeta. And Mike, this landfall now is making history here in New Orleans. 5 tropical landfalls just in one season. And you know, we thought Delta was the last one. Let's really hope that Zeta is the last one impacting us. Again, this now makes 11 landfalls just here in the U.S. this season alone. Mike?
Truly amazing, Paul. It really is when you think about the hit we've had in Louisiana. Again, getting landfall of Zeta happening for us right now. Then eventually we think coming right into New Orleans, north-northeast movement. There's an explosion of convection on the north side of this as well. So the northern eye wall likely contains the highest winds, and that's what's going to hit us there in New Orleans. So as bad as it is where Paul is right now, it only gets worse from this point going forward. The hurricane does really speed up here and races through Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, and then into the Carolinas. By tomorrow early morning, it's already in the middle of Alabama. There's a look at the radar, and you can see that the eye has come over Timbalier Island right here, Kokudri right here, Port Fourchon right in here. So it's hitting us and hitting us hard right now. And you can see that we got some really intense thunderstorms there on that northern side. And so New Orleans, where our winds are 33 gusting to 52, I would look for those to double as this big slug comes in, and you're really getting the northern eye wall to slam you here in the Crescent City. Around the eye, a really good indication we had an intensifying system, and as we mentioned, intensifying all the way through landfall. Rapid intensification happening for us today, and now making a landfall as we speak. When you look at a different that may mean is we could maximize our wind potential there in New Orleans, and I would ask you all right now to just hunker down, ride this thing out. Along the northern Gulf Coast that goes through tonight, a 2 that extends up into Atlanta. There's a look at your winds, and they are intense. Onshore flow right in here could be as high as 60 to 70 miles per hour here in Gulfport, over New Orleans here in the next couple of hours. Look at our to hurricane force in New Orleans, if not higher. Up to Hattiesburg, 75-mile-per-hour winds are possible for us here. There sits the system just off of there, Justin. Just show the timing where we could be looking at that center of circulation very close.
Tell you they were requested, and that's good news. People have put things away, taken about an hour or 2 hours ago. In fact, we saw people in this marina trying to batten down the hatches quite literally on some of these boats. The storm surge is going to be something that you can see those signs are almost fully covered, about a foot more rise, and then they're going to be fully covered, and so is this dock. Follow me this way. Matt Schaefer behind the lens. He's going to stay over there a little bit. But to give you an idea, with 3 to 5 feet of storm surge, this dock will be underwater. 5 to 8 feet of storm surge, and this dock will be underwater, and that also means some of the parking areas are also going to be underwater. The good news is the 6 to 9 feet of storm surge that is possible shouldn't be too much of an issue beyond maybe right about here. But just think about that. Could we see in just a few hours, as Zeta is pushing through, could we see all of this underwater? That is the expectation. And remember, storm surge is water above normally dry ground. Though this isn't ground, you have to believe that a dock should be dry, and this is a good example of that. I'm sorry, say that again, Mike Jenkins? 1 minute, very good. So, guys, to give you some perspective on where we are and where the storm is going to come from, that is southeast, okay? So the wind and the rain and everything's going to be blowing on us right there. Remember, we're on the eastern side of the storm, where Paul Goodloe is, and New Orleans is basically back behind me, okay? So the storm is going to be coming right over us this way and whipping around, those easterly winds coming in from the Gulf of Mexico. Before the power goes out, and of course tornadic activity is certainly possible. It's going to get dangerous here over the next few hours. The Weather Channel is tracking Zeta all night.
With the
And welcome back to the Weather Channel as we cover landfall of Hurricane Zeta, 4 to 9 coming in Louisiana this evening. The 5th named storm to make landfall in that state this season alone. That is a new record. We have some new video to show you from Grand Isle, Louisiana, where the winds are howling for us right now. We are on the eastern side of the eye of this, and so we're getting the eastern eye wall of it, and the winds are just fierce right now. Look at the damage already to some of the canopies at the gas stations, and we think that this rolls through southern Louisiana, does make a direct hit over New Orleans, and then races its way across the southeast. One place that's in danger is Bay St. Louis in coastal Mississippi. Let's go there now with our Justin Michaels, where storm surge and wind will be a problem, Justin.
Yeah, and Mike, that storm surge is already happening. The best example of it is here, the day pier. So imagine you own a boat, you want to come into Bay St. Louis for some dinner. This is where you can dock your boat. While you do that, just for a few hours for free, you can see the water is beginning to come up. And honestly, there's probably only about a foot of water down there, but the expectation, that foot is going to be followed by what could be another 8 feet of water. Yes. Believe it or not, we could see as much as 9 feet of storm surge here in Bay St. Louis tonight because of Hurricane Zeta. Could we also see the eye wall of Zeta as it's coming through and pushing off to the northeast? It certainly is possible. So this is the time for people here in Bay St. Louis and all over coastal Mississippi to make sure you're staying indoors in your safe place. Watch the Weather Channel as long as you have power, but make sure your safety plan is ready to go and you can get to those safe places, because also remember, we could very easily be on the eastern side of this storm, the eastern eye wall, the most dangerous. And that means we could also have severe weather being tornadic activity and other severe weather. So just make sure you are ready for anything. You can see here in the marina of Bay St. Louis how many boats are still out there. Well, you know what? I mean, that's a real sad thing, because with the storm surge continuing to come up, some of those boats absolutely could break their lines, and then that turns them into projectiles. I certainly wouldn't want to be between that boat and the seawall and the levee here in Bay St. Louis. In fact, let me swing you around and show you the levee. Matt Safer behind the lens. Take a look at the levee over here beyond the beach. That levee was installed after Bay St. Louis was, for all intents and purposes, wiped off the map during Hurricane Katrina. All those houses were certainly gone because of Katrina, and you can see in 2010 they christened that enormous seawall, that amazing levee 24 feet high, to protect Bay St. Louis. So let's hope they never see a hurricane like Katrina again, because if you can only imagine this, during Katrina the water was a lot higher than that seawall would protect. So hopefully for the people here and for generations to come, they never have to see that. You can see the storm break, and you can also see just how dark the sky is. We are in a pretty intense rain band right now, and that seawall right there is protecting the harbor. It's kind of remarkable, as a matter of fact, to show you how effective it is. Matt, just so the quality of the water here, how seemingly calm the water is in the protected harbor. Then if you follow me over here, take a look out onto the Bay of St. Louis. Is really ripping and rolling right now. Interestingly enough, there is as I tossed up to Alex right now, Alex, you and I both love animals to our core. There is a pelican just floating out there. I don't know if Matt can see it, but there's a pelican out there floating. And I don't think he seems to be too worse for the wear, Alex. I wouldn't want to be him, but I think he probably knows what he's doing better than we do. So
yeah, something
Alex,
tells me they know what they're doing, right? Just one of those adaptations they have. They've dealt with it. They'll ride it out. But yeah, I think you or I would get awfully queasy out there. That's what's happening at the coast. Thanks to Justin, we're going to get back out to him. But this storm is an interesting one because it is going to be zipping across the southeast. And so we are going to see really significant impacts well inland and metro areas like Atlanta, like Charlotte, like Raleigh, getting in on some significant effects. In fact, we think power outages are going to be fairly widespread from the Gulf Coast all the way up into western North Carolina and the upstate of South Carolina. So Asheville to Greenville, all the way down to New Orleans and Biloxi. Power outages, I think, will be adding up here as we go through the next 12 to 18 hours. Likely power outages all the way through the on-land trek of this system. So even as it heads off into parts of the Atlantic from the mid-Atlantic, we're going to be seeing power outages there. So get ready across places like Atlanta very early Thursday morning, working farther to the north and east as we head throughout the day. It's quick moving, and those winds will be packing quite a punch. Want to get you back to New Orleans with Paul Goodlow. Obviously, they're in the thick of it right now.
Yeah, we certainly are. Now winds gusting 50-plus miles per hour here across the city. Reports of power outages already here on Canal Street. We still see power and lights on here, but I'm sure some of the other neighborhoods are without power right now. Of course, we think about flooding with New Orleans, but with Hurricane Zeta making landfall now and bringing some of the strongest winds over the next 2 to 4 hours, the wind with this system, a Category 2 hurricane, is going to do a lot of damage, bring down a lot of trees, and bring down power as well. So we'll keep you posted all day long, all night long here in New Orleans and all across the Gulf Coast and the inland areas, all dealing with another landfall, this time Hurricane Zeta. Welcome back to the Weather Channel, and we're covering Zeta, Hurricane Zeta Category 2 making landfall. This video from Golden Meadow, Louisiana, showing the push onshore. Heavy rain, strong gusty winds, and yes, there's even a storm surge. Another concern for another landfall here. This is now the 11th landfall of the named system here in the U.S. and the 5th landfall just here in Louisiana alone, and our 3rd hurricane for Louisiana. This will make our 2nd Category 2. We also had Category 4 Hurricane Laura back at the end of August, and now we had Hurricane Delta make landfall about 2.5 weeks ago, followed by now another Hurricane Category 2 with Zeta. Here in New Orleans on Canal Street, we're dealing with some of the strongest winds so far, and the winds will continue to increase over the next 2.5 hours or so. We will most likely have the center of Zeta come right over New Orleans, something that hasn't happened in quite some time. In fact, the closest hurricane has come within 50 miles was 3 years ago with Hurricane Nate, but this one's making a direct landfall here, and that center coming right over New Orleans, and we often think about flooding. That's also an issue, but it's the winds. Look at the palm trees behind me here on Canal Street. They are swaying in the wind here, and we can see these winds perhaps even double in strength. It's a big concern. Power outages because of the strong gusty winds, probably one of the biggest impacts we'll have here across this Crescent City. Already reports of power outages in some parts of the city here in the central business district and the edge of the French Quarter. I still see plenty of lights on and power here, but it's a matter of time. The only bright spot with this is it's moving so fast, the intense winds come in and they move on out. This will not be a slow-moving storm, which is a great thing to talk about this, because again, we don't want the ongoing heavy rain and the strong winds, but it is still a concern because we haven't really dealt with winds this strong in quite some time here in New Orleans. So a lot of the infrastructure will be tested, and on top of that, there are still a lot of people, I think over 3,000 people who are living here now, or at least temporarily, because they could not stay in their homes in Lake Charles, in that area in Cameron Parish, because of what happened in the end of August with Hurricane Laura. So now people here are going through it. Southeastern New Orleans, we've been in the cone 6 other times. We missed all those storms. We are not missing Hurricane Zeta direct landfall here in a matter of about 2.5 hours with that center coming over here in New Orleans. But it's not just here in Louisiana. The impact stretched far to the east and far to the north as well. Well, let's head east to Bay St. Louis, Mississippi, also a victim of Hurricane Katrina, devastating that area. And you too, Justin, you're also going to be dealing with some decent storm surge, something that kind of makes a lot of people there in Bay St. Louis, they get some on edge when you talk about a storm surge of approaching a hurricane.
Yeah, they're not thrilled about the potential for that 6 to 9 feet of storm surge. The good news is, Paul, the infrastructure they put in place, the big seawall, the levee, after Katrina, it was dedicated in 2010, and most of it's about 24 feet high. A 6 to 9 foot storm surge against a 24-foot high levee is not going to have a real impact in downtown. However, the lower lying areas, there is great concern when you're on either side of that levee. Could there be issues in the low-lying areas? Absolutely. 3 to 5 feet of storm surge is deadly. 6 to 9 is absolutely deadly. And just think about that. 9 feet of storm surge. Remember, a one-story building is 10 feet. So that's a lot of water. Think about that. A one-story home underwater because of a 6 to 9 foot storm surge. Follow me out here very quickly. We wanted to come out to the end of the water break, the storm break, protecting the marina and the harbor here in Bay St. Louis to give you some idea also of the infrastructure in place because of Katrina. And you can see it is all concrete. In fact, the pier that we're on right now is all concrete, and they're actually building more of the marina right over here. So there's lots of infrastructure in place here. However, we do know as the water continues to come up, it's going to get closer and closer and closer to the very top of that seawall, and that is a big concern, especially because, Matt, show the boats here still in the harbor. There are still dozens of boats in the harbor. As many were taken out, probably even double the amount were taken out, there are still boats here from people who simply could not get here to take them out. Now, as far as any wind we're talking about, let's put the good old anemometer up. We're sustained sustained right about 20. There was a gust earlier at 25 miles per hour, but we know that's going to be going up. We're going to find ourselves here in Bay St. Louis in the eye wall of this storm, the eastern eye wall. The most dangerous part of the storm is going to be going right over Bay St. Louis as this storm speeds off to the northeast. That's a big concern because not only are we going to have that storm surge threat, also the wind, also the rain, and also the possibility for that severe weather. We're going to be watching it all. But as we take it to a very quick commercial break here on the Weather Channel, just take a look at the Bay of St. Louis and Mississippi Sound looking out into the Gulf of Mexico, churning because of Zeta.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel. A live look at Lake Pontchartrain, courtesy of our storm tracker Charles Peak. And Whitecaps, yes, this is not the Gulf of Mexico. This is Lake Pontchartrain. We were out there yesterday, and it was kind of choppy, but now it's a body of water you want to avoid. The strong easterly winds are howling here, gusting well over 50 miles per hour, and it's causing a little storm surge on the lake, both on the south shore, even the west side of Lake Pontchartrain. You are dealing with a rise of water well over 2 feet now, and that will continue as we have the wind just pushing and piling that water up on that side of the lake. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodlow live in New Orleans on Canal Street here, and it's a pretty wide street. You can see how the wind is just whipping the rain all down the street. You can see the beautiful palm trees. They're swaying in this wind. Again, the latest gust was over 50 or 52 miles per hour. As I walk this way, you can already see some things that are knocked down. There's a pretty big sign, construction sign there, has been toppled over. And a lot of people concern themselves with flooding here in New Orleans, the tropical system. That's going to happen with Katrina. But this is going to be definitely a bigger wind event. Yeah, we're going to have some rain. Flooding is going to be an issue. But in terms of causing the most damage, it's going to be this wind, which is howling in this area, and it's only going to get stronger. You can see this is a pretty big sign here, which was going back and forth on these springs earlier. The South Police contractor kind of secured this. But we want to take into account the power outages because of the strong winds coming on through here. So, again, and this is Canal Street, a pretty wide.
We fit a lot of life into our Subaru Forester.
It's good to be back.
Over the years, we trusted it to carry and protect the things that were most important to us. Good boy. We always knew we had a lot of life ahead of us.
Remember this?
That's why we chose a car we knew would be there for us through it all.
Welcome to the Subaru Forester, the longest-lasting, most trusted Forester ever.
Water?
Water tastes like water, so we fixed it. Neo.
At Harry & David, we know that a gift is more than a beautiful box. It's a lifetime of love, the joy of friendship, the moments together, big and small. We make it easy to celebrate the ones you love. Life is a gift. Share more.
Now is the time for a new bath from Bathfitter. Every Bathfitter bath is installed quickly, safely, and beautifully with a lifetime warranty. Go from old to new, from worn to wow. The beautiful bath you've always wanted, done right, installed by one expert technician, all in one day. We've been creating moments like these for 35 years, and we're here to help you get started. Book your free virtual or in-home design consultation today.
Black Friday used to mean deals gone in a flash. That was Black Friday then. This is Black Friday now. Target has deals all November, with new deals each week. In-store and on Target.com. It's Black Friday now at Target.
Hi folks, Joe Namath here, and if you're on Medicare, today is one of the only days of this year you can update your coverage and benefits. Before the deadline, you're entitled to eliminate copays and get dental, prescriptions, transportation, and meals at no additional cost. Plus, your zip code may have coverage with the Give Back benefit that adds money back to your Social Security check every month.
I called to get dental, transportation, meals, and the Give Back benefit. They helped me so much.
With this virus situation, I called to get everything I'm entitled to. I couldn't believe I was missing out on so many benefits.
With the uncertainty of the virus, you need to get everything you're entitled to. Millions of people have trusted the Medicare Coverage Helpline. You can too. Don't miss the deadline. Call now. It's free.
Call 1-800-975-4570. That's 1-800-975-4570 now.
You're watching America's most trusted TV news network.
We've got a severe weather threat.
Winds have been gusting the full force of this thing.
The Weather Channel.
Welcome back to the Weather Channel. We're still tracking Hurricane Zeta. I'm meteorologist Paul Goodell live in New Orleans, trying to get a quick break from the wind, because if I step out here, if the wind now is whipping and driving the rain almost horizontally. You can see here in Canal Street, some of the palm trees are getting battered by this. Wind gusts over 50 miles per hour. That's tropical storm force wind gusts. And like we've been saying for the last hour or so, we're going to see our winds increase, and they have been, and it will continue at least over the next 90 minutes, if not for 2 more hours of increasing winds. And then we'll probably get the center come through here as well, and maybe a brief drop in the winds. And then we have the backside of this as well. So you see some people still decide to come out here, but we have that in most areas as well. That for some reason, at least I'm getting paid to stand out here. Some people perhaps just do this for fun. This is to tell you what's going on here with the wind. The wind's definitely going to be some of the biggest concerns here in New Orleans. We always concern ourselves with flooding here in the city. Right now, the rainfall is still intense right now. We're closing in on an inch of rainfall, but it's the winds. We're bringing down the power. All weather reports of people losing power here in New Orleans. We'll see those reports definitely increase as we have the winds increase throughout the rest of this evening, and then finally wind down probably closer to midnight tonight. So we are definitely kind of in the thick of this, and it's only getting worse as we continue through the sunset hour and beyond. And unlike you're keeping close track of this, we're probably pretty close to having landfall along the coast here in Louisiana. Mike, I think we're getting pretty close to landfall on the coast, are we?
Oh, I gotta tell you, buddy, hang in there, man. We're getting some pretty serious stuff coming through for you right now. This, I think, for now, between now and the next 2 hours, is going to be the roughest stuff for New Orleans, where the winds are really now starting to pick up. So be careful, my friend. What Paul is in the thick of the northern eye wall, the extreme northern eye wall at this point. Then how about some of this? How about some of the debris that's hitting the power lines in Golden Meadow? This is going to be south of where Paul is. Look at the arcing power lines here, and look at the surge that's coming in now. It's going to be a really quick storm surge event. We're going to have surge for a couple of hours, and then it's going to back off pretty quickly as the storm races inland for us here. So plenty to digest here, and to digest quickly. Obviously, at this point, if you're in southern Louisiana, southern Mississippi, we urge you to just hunker down at this point. Really, southern and central Alabama as well. Just hunker down at this point and ride this thing out, as the intensity of it is high in Category 2. It's going to come in quick and hard and fast, and you're going to be feeling it. And then, just like that, it's going to go away. All right, we take a look at the radar. New Orleans right now gusts at 39, but I think they're going to go higher as this really intense burst of convection on the northern eye wall comes in. Truly, the eye itself is not that far from New Orleans. Measuring out here, the center of the eye, roughly 50, although it's quickly changing as the storm's moving very, very fast. Then we've got a tornado warning on the extreme eastern outer bands of this, Escambia County in Florida and in Alabama. We've got a tornado warning here with a storm coming toward Atmore here. In Atmore, get to shelter quickly as this storm rides right up Highway 97 tonight. Pretty good couplet on there. You can see the signature right in there. We'll time this out for you in Atmore around 5:03. So that only gives you about 10 minutes from now, and in Freemanville shortly after that. Large area where tornadoes are possible here, including from New Orleans to Biloxi, Mobile, Pensacola, Crestview, right up I-65 toward Montgomery as well. That watch until 12 o'clock tonight. All right, we've shown you New Orleans where Paul is getting his absolutely hammered. Bay St. Louis in Mississippi, not much better. Our Justin Michaels is there where the wind is going to be howling for us, and Justin, the water is going to be rising.
Yeah, in fact, the water's coming up pretty quickly, Mike. The wind is really coming in. I just used my anemometer and clocked a 40-mile-per-hour gust. In fact, let's try that again and see what I can come up with. Oh, Mike, so we're in the mid-30s right there. So, yes, it's definitely coming in. In fact, let me show you the storm surge. We can actually see the water surging into the harbor. Just watch the motion of the water. That is the storm surge happening. You can also see the waves hitting the storm break there, protecting the harbor. We have seen enormous bursts of water come over that storm break. So, yes, the storm is still hours away from getting here. We could absolutely find ourselves in the eastern eye wall. For the people here in Bay St. Louis, I hope that's not the case, but the likelihood is certainly there. I'll tell you what, folks, if this is as bad as 40-mile-per-hour winds are and the storm surge coming in as quickly as it is, I can't imagine what it's going to be like in the next 2-3 hours as we could see the eastern eye wall and just the intense power of Mother Nature as this storm continues to push off to the northeast. Of course, the Weather Channel is tracking every angle of this storm as Zeta pushes off to the northeast, coming to Bay St. Louis very soon.
As president, the first step I will take will be to get control of the virus that has ruined so many lives.
What would Joe Biden do to beat COVID? Double testing sites so we can safely reopen. Manufacture PPE here in America. Restore the White House Pandemic Office. Save the Affordable Care Act and...
Welcome back to the Weather Channel's coverage of Hurricane Zeta making landfall just a short while ago in coastal Louisiana, Golden Meadow, Louisiana. A personal weather station there recording wind gusts as high as 105 miles per hour. Some significant storm surge, as well as a lot of debris in the air arcing the power lines there. This is going to be a very intense hit. It's not going to last very long. The storm's moving very quickly, but it's going to be a very potent uppercut to southern Louisiana, including in New Orleans. Let's take you there live now with meteorologist Paul Goodloe. Paul.
Hey there, Mike. We are getting buffeted by some of the strongest winds so far. Airport's only reporting like 48 to 52, but we're getting easily 60-plus miles per hour. If you look at the radar, the northern eye wall where the strongest winds are, it's about 18, 20 miles from where we are right here in downtown New Orleans here on Canal Street. So these winds will only continue to howl here. You can see some of these huge palm trees. They're being just flopped around with these strong winds. And I was trying to walk up here against the wind, nearly impossible. The winds will only get stronger. The good news is this system is howling and just hauling onshore, which means we're going to be in the strongest winds for a much shorter duration than, say, even with Hurricane Delta made landfall a couple of weeks ago, and certainly shorter than when Hurricane Laura made landfall in southwest Louisiana. I mention these hurricanes because now this is the third hurricane to make landfall just this hurricane season here in Louisiana. So this state has taken a beating so far, and we've also had 2 tropical storms make landfall as well. So now 5. This makes the 5th landfall of a named tropical system just this hurricane season alone. That's a new record here in Louisiana. But that's what we forecasted. We forecasted an above average year, and that has lived up, probably overperformed in terms of where we are. We're now as deep as we've ever been in the Greek alphabet in terms of named systems, and we've never had a Zeta this strong or make landfall, let alone here in the U.S. Yeah, our 27th named storm, and it's not too far from being a major hurricane as well. Fortunately, it has made landfall, so we don't expect any more strengthening out of this system, but still a Category 2 hurricane is nothing to sneeze at here. We all know what happened with Hurricane Katrina here and the flooding disaster that became of it here in New Orleans. Fortunately, a bigger threat is going to be these winds and bringing down trees and power. Power outages already in parts of the city, not here on the edge of the French Quarter here, but that could change as we have even stronger winds head this way. I know, Mike, you mentioned there was 100+ mile-per-hour wind gusts in the area that made landfall, so that's not out of the question, dealing with wind gusts that strong here into New Orleans. So bringing power down, bringing trees down. Canal Street, one of the widest streets in this city for sure, but also one of the widest streets in the country. So to have the winds this strong in this wide street, imagine some of the smaller neighborhoods, the Garden District, parts of the French Quarter, where the streets are more narrow, the wind actually accelerates through there as well. So to have winds howling 60, 70, 80 miles per hour for the next couple hours, definitely a possibility, bringing down trees, bringing down power lines, and that's going to be the widespread concern. A side concern of that is the rainfall. We've already picked up about an inch of rain, and we're still seeing some very heavy rain. Hard to measure with it blowing sideways, but we have pumps that pump the water up and out of the city. You start losing power in some of those pumps. I know the city is doing everything they have to have backup generators, but that is always going to be a concern when you lose power, and you have to rely on the power to work the pumps to keep the city dry. So an ongoing concern here as we have some of the strongest winds yet move across the city. And again, this forward speed of the storm means over the next hour to even 90 minutes, the strongest part of the storm is coming right through the city of New Orleans. It has been years since we had a center make landfall here in New Orleans, and we've dodged a lot of storms. Even this year, Zeta is making a direct landfall as we speak here in New Orleans. But also impacts continue farther east, farther north, all across the Carolinas as we head on towards tomorrow. But tonight, another concern on the coast is where Justin Michaels is. He is live in Bay St. Louis, Mississippi. And Justin, the big concern there with the winds, but also the storm surge coming along with Zeta.
Yes.